Every decade has a heartbeat, but the 70s had 12. And here's what I mean by that, because I'm not talking about the biggest artist of the decade or the most legendary album. I'm talking about the song that sat at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 during each specific month. January, February, March, all the way through December. Because here's what nobody tells you. When you line those 12 songs up side by side, they don't just tell you what was popular.
If you need me, call me. No matter where you are.
They tell you exactly what America was feeling, what it was going through, what it needed to hear. And some of these you're going to recognize the second I say the title. Others have a story behind them you never heard. Either way, by the time we get to December, I think you'll see the 70s completely differently. Let's start the year. January, American Pie by Don McLean.
That I could make those people dance and maybe they'd be happy.
January 1972. And the song sitting at the top of the Billboard Hot 100 is 8.5 minutes long. Think about that for a second. 8.5 minutes. At a time when radio stations were terrified of anything over 3 minutes, this song didn't just break the rule, it crushed it. And America didn't just accept it. America memorized every single word. American Pie by Don McLean. Now, you've heard this song 1,000 times. You know the chorus. But here's the thing. Do you actually know what it's about? Because Don McLean spent months insisting he wouldn't explain it. For years, people debated it. The day the music died, Miss American Pie, the Jester, the King. He let everybody argue, and that mystery became part of the song's identity. But here's the part that still gets me.
The music died.
The song is officially about February 3rd, 1959, the night a plane crash killed Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper. McLean was just a 12-year-old paperboy who heard the news on his delivery route that morning, and he carried it for over a decade before he found the words.
Now do you believe in rock and roll? Can music?
Think about that. 12 years old, delivering newspapers, reading a headline that stops him cold, and eventually turning that grief into the longest song ever to hit number 1. It entered the chart in January 1972 and sat there for 4 weeks. But the real number's this. The song is 8 minutes and 32 seconds.
But the levee was dry, and then good old boys would...
Radio stations had to cut it in half just to fit it, but listeners still flipped the record over to hear the full version. That's how badly people needed it. And if you've ever had a memory so big, so heavy, that it took you years to even find the words for it, you already understand exactly what Don McLean was doing.
Day that I died. Now for 10...
That's January, and we're just getting started. February is next, and this one is personal.
Remember how that music used to make me smile.
February, Killing Me Softly with a Song by Roberta Flack. February 1973, and Roberta Flack did something that month that almost never happens in pop music. She made you feel like she was singing directly to you. Just you, nobody else in the room. Killing Me Softly with a Song. 5 weeks at number 1. And if you've ever heard this song playing quietly in a room, I mean really heard it, not just let it pass in the background, you know there's something almost uncomfortable about it, like she's reading something private, something you didn't write down but you lived. Here's the backstory, and stay with me on this one. The song was originally written by Charles Fox and Norman Gimbel, inspired by a poem by Lori Lieberman. Lieberman had been at a concert watching singer-songwriter Don McLean perform Yes, that Don McLean from January. And she was so emotionally wrecked by his performance that she started writing about it on a napkin right there in the audience. The idea of a stranger singing about your life like he knew you, like he'd been inside your head. And then Roberta Flack heard Lieberman's original recording on a plane. She said she couldn't move for the rest of the flight. She had to have that song. When she recorded it, she brought something different, something deeper. The way she holds back on certain lines, then leans into them. That's not technique. That's a woman telling the truth. It won the Grammy for Record of the Year and Song of the Year in 1974. And in the decades since, it's been covered more times than most people can count. The Fugees brought it back in 1996 for a whole new generation, but there's something about the original, about Roberta Flack in February 1973. Stripped all the way down to her voice and a story, no flash, no spectacle, just truth. And if you've ever been in a room where a song described you so perfectly that it almost felt like an invasion, you know exactly what this month was about. March is next, and this one is about moving.
Then he looked right through me as if I...
Real talk. Only 9% of you are subscribed. That hurts. We're spending hours digging through archives, fact-checking every detail, bringing these stories back to life. And if you're watching this far, you clearly care. So hit subscribe. It's free and takes 2 seconds. Now, to my subscribers, barely any of you have joined the membership. And honestly, that stings even more. You know the work we put in. You keep coming back. If these videos have ever made you feel something, if this music means something to you, join the membership. It's one coffee a month, and it's the only way we keep this going. Let's build this together. All right, back to it. March, Love Train by the OJs. March 1973. And if Roberta Flack was a quiet room, the OJs were a full auditorium on its feet. Love Train, 1 week at #1, but don't let that fool you, because some songs aren't measured in weeks. They're measured in what they make you feel the second that bass line drops. The OJs were already respected. They'd been recording since the early 60s, but by 1972, they linked up with producers Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff at Philadelphia International Records, and everything changed. What Gamble and Huff were building in Philadelphia at that moment was essentially the blueprint for what we'd eventually call soul music at its most orchestrated, its most lush. Strings, horns, rhythm section locked tight, vocals stacked to the ceiling. And Love Train was the sound of all that coming together on one track. Here's what's interesting about this song, though. On the surface, it sounds like pure joy, and it is, but it's also a message. The Vietnam War was still grinding. The country was fractured in ways that felt irreparable to a lot of people. And Gamble and Huff sat down and wrote a song that was essentially a plea. People all over the world, join hands, start a love train. Simple, almost too simple, and yet it worked. Here's the thing about music that comes from a real place. It doesn't have to be complicated to cut deep. The OJs sang that track like they meant every single syllable. And you can always tell when a group actually believes what they're singing. Love Train only spent 1 week at the top, but decades later, you hear those first few notes and something in your chest lifts involuntarily, like your body remembered before your brain did. If you were at any cookout, any house party, any family gathering in the 70s, you know exactly what I'm talking about. April is next. In April 1973 had a song that told a different kind of story, one about waiting. April, Tie a Yellow Ribbon Round the Old Oak Tree by Tony Orlando and Dawn. April 1973, 4 weeks at number 1. And the story behind this song is one of the most human things I've ever heard connected to a pop record. Tie a Yellow Ribbon Round the Old Oak Tree, Tony Orlando and Dawn. Now I know, some of you are really smiling, some of you are rolling your eyes a little. Stay with me, because the song wasn't written as a throwaway. It was based on a real concept, a man being released from prison, writing to the woman he loved, telling her that if she still wanted him, to tie a yellow ribbon around the old oak tree near her house. And if it wasn't there when the bus pulled up, he'd understand. He'd keep moving. Can you feel the weight of that? Getting off a bus, looking out the window, not knowing if the person you love still loves you back, whether you'd burn that bridge completely or whether it could still hold.
If you received my letter telling you
Tony Orlando didn't even want to record this song at first. He'd heard the demo and thought it was too simple, too sentimental. His producer had to convince him. And when they finally laid it down, it caught something real. The tension, the hope, that particular feeling of almost knowing but not yet. The record came out in March of 1973, shot to number 1 by April, and sat there for 4 straight weeks. It became one of the best-selling singles of the entire decade. And here's what nobody saw coming.
look for me, 'cause I couldn't bear to.
The yellow ribbon became a symbol, first for POWs and MIA soldiers in Vietnam. Then years later, it took on other meanings: military service, support, return. The song didn't just top the chart, it contributed a symbol to American culture. Tony Orlando thought it was too simple, and that simplicity changed things. Some of y'all just nodded because you know the feeling. You know what it means to watch out a window and not know what you're about to see. May is next, and May belonged to a genius.
I'm coming home, I've done my time.
Oh, I'm glad.
May, You Are the Sunshine of My Life by Stevie Wonder. May 1973, and the man at number 1 is 23 years old, 23, and he is already operating on a completely different level than almost everyone around him. You Are the Sunshine of My Life, Stevie Wonder, 1 week at number 1. But this song is from the album Talking Book, and if you've never sat with that full record, you're missing something important. Because Talking Book was the beginning of what people now call Stevie's classic period. The run of albums from 1972 to 1976. Talking Book, Intervisions, Fulfilling This First Finale, Songs in the Key of Life is one of the most sustained creative stretches in the history of American music. And Sunshine is where it started to reveal itself. Here's the detail that gets me every time. Stevie Wonder wrote the song. He played most of the instruments, he produced it, and then he didn't even sing the lead vocal on the first verse. He gave that to 2 of his backup singers, Jim Gilstrap and Lonnie Groves. One black man's voice, one white woman's voice, harmonizing on a Stevie Wonder love song in 1972. That was intentional. That was Stevie saying something without saying it directly. The song won the Grammy for Best Pop Vocal Performance, male, in 1974. And it's been in movies, commercials, wedding playlists, baby showers, everything, because it's about as close as a human being can get to capturing pure joy in a chord progression. But what I keep coming back to is how effortless it sounds, how happy it sounds. And the fact that Stevie Wonder, who by this point had already negotiated complete creative control from Motown at 21 years old, no easy thing, was using that freedom not to prove something, but to just be joyful.
You are the apple.
To share it. There's a lesson in that. I'll let you sit with it. June is next. And June had church in it. June, I'll Take You There by the Staple Singers. June 1972. And the song that hits number one is anchored by a bass line that sounds less like music and more like gravity. I'll Take You There, the Staple Singers. Now, do you know the Staple Singers? Because here's the thing, you know this song, but you might not know the family behind it. Roebuck Pops Staples started the group with his children in the early 1950s. They came up singing gospel, real gospel, the kind that came from Mississippi Delta soil and Sunday morning testimony. And by the early 60s, they were doing something unusual. They were taking that gospel foundation and laying it right next to the civil rights movement, singing alongside Martin Luther King Jr. at marches, using music not just for church, but as a tool, as a statement. By the early 70s, they signed with Stax Records in Memphis, and producer Al Bell helped them shift slightly toward funk and soul. The result was I'll Take You There. Here's what's wild about this record. The bass line, that rolling hypnotic groove underneath everything, was actually sampled from an instrumental called Melting Pot by Booker T and the MGs. Al Bell brought that loop in and built the whole track around it. Then Mavis Staples stepped up to the microphone. And what came out wasn't just a vocal performance, it was a declaration. She is not whispering. She is not asking. She is telling you, I'll take you there, to a place with no smiling faces lined to the races. She's talking about freedom. She's talking about dignity. And she's wrapping it in a groove that makes your body move before your brain even registers what she's saying. That's the genius of it. The message arrives through the music first, and by the time you hear the words, you're already there. June 1972, 1 week at the top, but Mavis Staples has been taking people there for decades. July is next. And July gave us something different, something quieter, something that's been needed at every hard moment ever since. July, Lean on Me by Bill Withers. July 1972, 3 weeks at number one. And the man who wrote it was a former factory worker who'd been assembling toilet seats at a Lockheed plant until he was 32 years old. Lean on Me, Bill Withers. There are songs that become bigger than the moment they were recorded. This is one of them. It's been played at funerals, at weddings, at church, at protests, at high school graduations, at moments so specific that entire rooms of people suddenly need to sing together because words alone aren't enough, and the origin of it is almost painfully simple. Bill Withers grew up in Slab Fork, West Virginia, small town, poor. He had a stutter as a kid that made social situations brutal. He joined the Navy at 17, partly just to get out. He didn't start making music professionally until he was in his early 30s, which in the music industry might as well be 100 years old. Lean on Me came out of a memory. He was thinking about the community he grew up in. Small towns have this thing where when one person is struggling, somebody else shows up without a formal announcement, without anything expected in return. You just show up, you lean, you hold. He wrote the entire song on a piano at a studio in just one take. The story goes he walked up, sat down, played what was in his head, and that was it. Here's what still gets me. Bill Withers never considered himself a superstar. He retired from music in 1985 in his early 40s, walked away completely on his own terms, and spent the rest of his life largely out of the spotlight. He said in interviews that he was at peace with it, that he'd made what he needed to make.
We know that there always.
He passed away in March 2020, and within days, Lean on Me was everywhere again. People playing it on their porches during lockdown, singing it through apartment windows. Because that's what the song is. It's not a hit, it's a lifeline. If you've ever needed someone to show up for you or been the one who showed up, you know what Bill Withers was talking about. August is next, and August didn't come quietly.
We all in pain.
August, War by Edwin Starr. August 1970. 3 weeks at number 1. And this record didn't enter a room. It kicked the door down. War, Edwin Starr, what is it good for? You already know the answer. Here's what most people don't know about how this song actually came to exist. Motown originally recorded War with the Temptations. Berry Gordy liked the track, but he was nervous. Motown had a very intentional crossover strategy. They wanted to reach white audiences. They wanted to stay out of controversy. They didn't want their biggest acts taking political positions that might cost them airplay. So War sat unreleased, a protest song against the Vietnam War, shelved because the label was protecting its brand. But Motown fans started writing letters. They'd heard the Temptations do the song live, and they wanted the record. So Berry Gordy made a decision. He wouldn't put it out under the Temptations. He'd give it to someone who had less to lose commercially, Edwin Starr. Edwin Starr walked in, heard the track, and then did something to that vocal that the Temptations version never had. He went somewhere primal. He didn't sing the protest. He screamed it. He howled it. He put his whole body into that record like it was the last thing he'd ever put on tape, and America responded in a way Motown didn't fully expect. August 1970, number 1 for 3 weeks, in the middle of a country that was tearing itself apart over a war that millions of people knew was wrong. The Temptations version was finally released as well, but there was only one Edwin Starr. He only had one number 1 hit in his career, one, but he made it count in a way that people are still feeling 50 years later. When something is this honest, this raw, it doesn't need a sequel. September is next. And September 1970 gave us one of the most powerful solo moments in the history of soul music. September. Ain't No Mountain High Enough by Diana Ross. September 1970, and Diana Ross had just left the Supremes. Think about the weight of that moment. For most of the 1960s, she was the face of the most successful girl group in history, the Supremes, Motown's crown jewel. But she left, went solo, and now she needed to prove to herself and to everyone watching that she could carry a room on her own. Ain't No Mountain High Enough, 3 weeks at number 1. Now, y'all, you know this song. You've heard the original. Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell recorded it in 1967, and it was stunning. A duet. Two voices in conversation. And that version is a classic. But what Diana Ross did with it in 1970 is completely different. Producer Nicholas Ashford, one half of Ashford and Simpson, the duo that wrote the original, came back and reimagined the song for Diana. He didn't just give her the track with new vocals. He built a new structure. He added a spoken intro, an orchestral swell.
No matter how far, just call my name. I'll be.
He created something that felt less like a pop song and more like a proclamation. And Diana Ross stood up to it. She rose to every single second of it. Here's the thing about this version that I keep coming back to. The original Marvin and Tammy version is a love song between two people. But the Diana Ross version, the way she delivers it, sounds like a woman speaking to herself, convincing herself, reminding herself of something she needed to hear. Ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no valley low enough, nothing can keep me from you. When you hear it in the context of September 1970, knowing she just made one of the biggest career transitions of her life, knowing the entire industry was waiting to see if she could do it alone, that's not just a song, that's armor. And it worked. October's next, and October 1970 might be the most emotional entry on this entire list. October, I'll Be There by the Jackson 5. October 1970, 5 weeks at number 1, and the lead vocal belongs to a 12-year-old boy. I'll Be There, the Jackson 5, Michael Jackson. Now, the Jackson 5 had already hit number 1 3 times in 1970 before this. I Want You Back in January, A BC in April, The Love You Save in June. 3 straight number ones in 1 year by a group of kids. The youngest of them, Michael, was 11 years old when they started that run.
Just look over your shoulders, honey. Ooh.
But I'll Be There was different. It wasn't bubblegum. It wasn't up-tempo pop designed to make you dance. It was a ballad, quiet, almost fragile. And Motown gave the lead vocal to a boy who hadn't even finished 6th grade yet. And what came out of that studio should not have been possible. Because when you hear Michael Jackson sing I'll Be There at 12 years old, you don't hear a child. You hear something that transcends age completely. There's an ache in that vocal, a sincerity, like he understood heartbreak and devotion at a cellular level before he had any real reason to. Here's what's interesting from a production standpoint. The song was written and produced by Hal Davis, Willie Hutch, and Berry Gordy himself. They gave Michael a moment in the bridge, a call and response section with older brother Jermaine that became the emotional center of the record. When those two voices intertwine on that bridge, it still does something to people. 5 weeks at number 1, one of the longest running number 1s of 1970. And it was sung by a 12-year-old boy who had no business reaching that deep into something that real. If you've ever heard this song in a quiet moment and felt something unexpected rise up in your chest, you're not alone. That happens to people who heard it in 1970. It still happens now. That's not nostalgia. That's just truth doing what truth does. November is next. And November 1971 had a song that changed the way people thought about what a movie soundtrack could be. November, theme from Shaft by Isaac Hayes. November 1971, 2 weeks at number 1, And I want you to sit with this for a second. Isaac Hayes won the Academy Award for Best Original Song for this record. Theme from Shaft. That was the first time a black composer had won that Oscar for original music. First time. 1972, Academy Awards. Isaac Hayes walked on that stage in a gold shirt, a massive chain, a cape, and he accepted that award in front of an industry that had spent decades either ignoring black artists or putting them in boxes. But let's back up, because the story of this song starts with a film. Shaft was a 1971 blaxploitation film directed by Gordon Parks about a black private detective in New York City. The studio came to Isaac Hayes, who at that point was already legendary in soul music circles, one of the architects of the Memphis sound at Stax Records, and asked him to score the entire film. Isaac didn't just write music, he wrote a world. The wah-wah guitar, the hi-hat, that bass, the spoken word intro asking who the man is, and then the answer. And the answer was designed to make black audiences in 1971 feel something they'd been starved of in mainstream cinema. A cool, competent, powerful black man at the center of the story, unapologetically.
Man, but no one understands him but his woman.
Here's what's wild. The theme itself is barely a song in the traditional sense. It's mostly groove, it's atmosphere, it's texture, and it still hit number one because sometimes the vibe is the point. Sometimes you don't need a traditional verse-chorus structure. Sometimes you just need to walk into a room and own it. And that is exactly what Isaac Hayes did. 2 weeks at number one doesn't capture what this moment actually meant. For a generation of black Americans watching themselves reflected on screen and hearing themselves reflected on radio at the same time. Shaft was more than entertainment. It was recognition. December is next, and December is where we end this year, with a love story that's also a confession. December, Me and Mrs. Jones by Billy Paul. December 1972. And 3 weeks before Christmas, the number one song in America was an affair. Me and Mrs. Jones, Billy Paul, 3 weeks at number one. And I want you to think about what that means.
We got a thing going on.
This isn't a song about righteous love. It's not a celebration. It's a man sitting in a cafe every day at 6:30, meeting a married woman, knowing everything is wrong about it, and choosing to do it anyway. And America sang along. Billy Paul was a Philadelphia soul singer, trained in jazz, signed to Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff's Philadelphia International Records, same label as the O'Jays from March. And Gamble and Huff wrote this song for him. They needed a vocalist who could walk that line between tender and guilty, someone who could make you understand why somebody would do something they knew they shouldn't do.
We got a thing going.
Billy Paul had a voice like late autumn. Something in it sounded lived in. Something in it sounded like he knew exactly what those lyrics meant. Here's what's fascinating about the cultural reception of this song. It was morally complicated, and it didn't apologize for being morally complicated.
But it's much too strong.
There's no verse where he decides to do the right thing. There's no resolution where he walks away. He just sits there and tells you what this is, what it feels like, and he trusts you to hold the complexity of it. It won the Grammy for Best R&B Vocal Performance, male in 1973, and it remains one of the most covered soul songs ever recorded. And here's what I think about when this song comes on. December, end of the year, people sitting with decisions they made, wondering if they did the right thing, wondering what comes next. and a man with a rich, honest voice just telling you the truth about a thing that's hard to say out loud. Some of y'all know exactly what Billy Paul was talking about. I'm not going to say anything else about that.
Jones, Mrs. Jones.